These developments, I'm joined from Tel Aviv by political analyst Tom Grass. Tom, thank you very much for joining us today.
Good to be with you.
Tom, how significant is this 20-point peace plan compared to previous U.S. initiatives in the Israeli-Palestinian conflict?
Well, it's definitely the most serious of the ones during the present two-year war between Israel and Hamas, because it looks to an end game. It looks to post-war scenarios. I'm not sure I would say it's as significant yet as agreements in the past, like the Oslo peace agreement between Israel and the PLO in 1993 or the Camp David agreement, but it could yet turn in to some all-encompassing agreement way beyond Gaza that would also offer hope for the wider Middle East and indeed for the whole world, which is, let me just explain very briefly. I think it's good for Israel. It's good for Palestinians that want to live in peace, but not good for Hamas. It's good not just for the Arab world, but for the wider Muslim world, which is why other countries have welcomed it, including Indonesia, Pakistan, Malaysia, Saudi Arabia, Jordan, Turkey, UAE, India. And it's bad for people on the far left, including people in university campuses in America and Europe who have been screaming for the river to the sea and trying to demonize Israel and throwing lots of fake accusations like genocide and famine and so on. And it's also bad for the far right in Israel that wants to annex the West Bank. But for anyone that's more moderate, I think it's a good plan, yes.
Tom, Israel has already agreed to the plan. From your perspective, why do you think Netanyahu signed on so quickly?
Well, I don't think it was so quick, because I think essentially Netanyahu's getting most of the war goals he stated right at the beginning of the war, which is to get all the hostages back. They'll come back within 72 hours if Hamas agrees to the plan and honors it. Hamas will be disarmed, which is another one of Israel's war goals. And Gaza will be demilitarized so it doesn't threaten Israeli security anymore. Because remember, it's not just the present war from October 7th, 2023. There were about 4 or 5 previous attacks on Israel, smaller ones, in 2009, 2012, 2014, 2018, 2021, where Hamas also attacked Israel with rockets and other terrorism. So Israel wants Gaza to be demilitarized, and that is what this plan provides for. And it also provides to neither have Hamas nor the Palestinian Authority unless the Palestinian Authority seriously reforms itself and becomes a body interested in coexistence with Israel.
So the proposal gives Donald Trump a central role as head of the so-called Board of Peace. How do you interpret this unusual setup?
Well, I think that you need somebody who will oversee everything, because there are bound to be disagreements, there are bound to be hiccups or problems, and really only someone like Trump can bang heads together. He can pick up the phone, for example, to people who are more sympathetic to, let's say, the remnants of Hamas, like the Qatari leadership or President Erdogan of Turkey or the Egyptians. And he can also pick up the phone to the Israeli leadership. So inevitably, there will be all kinds of problems down the road. And you need someone who can, bash heads together. And Trump, because he cajoles and threatens people with all kinds of stuff, whether it's, tariffs or whatever, withholding this or that, Trump will no doubt get involved when he needs to. I don't think he'll do any day-to-day supervision of a peace plan, but he'll be there buzzing around in the background, ready to step in if necessary.
So looking at Hamas, what are the chances it will even consider agreeing to this plan?
Well, I don't think Hamas will want to say yes, but Hamas's paymasters are Qatar, and it seems like Qatar have signed on. In fact, they've already welcomed it officially, the Qatari government. And I'm not sure Hamas are in a position to defy Qatar. And in fact, I've been arguing for 2 years that if the West had put a bit more pressure on Qatar, instead of accepting their very generous financial donations to every universities, political campaigns, sports events, and the like, the war could have stopped sooner, because Qatar are the one party that could tell Hamas to stop the war. And I think that although Israel was criticized for striking the Hamas leadership in Qatar in an airstrike a couple of weeks ago, I think we've seen a change in position for the better from Qatar since then. And Qatar is telling Hamas, stop your war. It's now causing us more trouble than it's worth. We don't want to get involved directly, which is what happened when Israel did that airstrike on Hamas leadership in Qatar. And in fact, in the last few days, I've seen a noticeable difference in Algeria, the mouthpiece of Qatar, have suddenly softened their position on Israel and are being less pro-Hamas. So, I think Israel's act, which was criticized at the time by Netanyahu on Qatar, have changed Qatari's position. And I think Qatar are the only people that can really pressure Hamas.
So Germany, France, the UK and the EU leadership have all welcomed the plan. How important is European endorsement at this stage?
It is important, and what's most important is they stop interfering and in effect save Hamas, which is what they've been doing by keep on calling for premature ceasefires and giving Hamas hope and giving the idea that they will recognize a Palestinian state without any conditions, with Hamas still in power. What the European leaders should have done is say we will consider a Palestinian state once Hamas releases hostages and gives up power. Instead, the Europeans have been prolonging the war by giving Hamas false hope that they can win the war, giving them a diplomatic backup. So it is important that they have finally come on board with the kind of Trump American position. And the best thing the Europeans can do is to stop dividing the West and dividing the democracies and trying to undermine America and Israel and in effect supporting Hamas and allow this plan to take effect. So it's important that they have, come on board with it, yes.
Mr. Gross, the humanitarian crisis in Gaza is one of the driving forces behind international pressure. Does this plan adequately address humanitarian concerns?
Well, yes, it's a fantastic hardship that many Gazans are going through. And yes, it does, of course, because the moment the fighting stops, and according to the plan, it will stop almost immediately if Hamas releases the hostages within 72 hours, the fighting will stop. And, although lots of aid does go into Gaza, of course, it's difficult with distribution when there's an ongoing war going on, So the moment the fighting stops, the moment Hamas agrees to effect surrender, Israel will also lay down its arms, and the humanitarian situation, of course, can improve greatly.
So what do you think? How might Palestinian leadership outside Hamas, particularly the Palestinian Authority, respond to the proposal?
Well, the Palestinian Authority have welcomed the proposal and endorsed it, which is refreshing. But we'll have to wait and see whether they actually will implement the reforms that Trump has set for the Palestinian Authority. And only if they do implement those reforms will they have a role to play in future in the governing of Gaza. And just to remind people, what Trump has requested of the Palestinian Authority is to stop payments to terrorists. It has been paying financial rewards to the families of suicide bombers, large amounts of money. He's asked them to recognize the state of Israel as a Jewish state. In other words, not to have two states, both of which will be Arab states, but have one state primarily Jewish and one state primarily Arab. That's what they have to recognize. Also to disarm terror organizations within the West Bank, and also to reform its education system. So if the Palestinian Authority does all that, then they will have a role to play. And indeed, I think the vast majority of Israelis will feel comfortable with the Palestinian Authority, just like the vast majority of Israelis feel comfortable with peace with Egypt and Bahrain and Morocco and the United Arab Emirates and others that do not threaten Israel's existence. If the PA will reform and become a partner for peace, then I think there can be peace between Israel and Palestinians.
So finally, if Hamas rejects the plan, what do you think the immediate consequences will be, both on the ground in Gaza and diplomatically?
Well, I think it's over for Hamas. If they reject it, Trump has made clear, and presumably all those parties backing this deal have also gone along with the idea that Trump said that Israel can finish off Hamas militarily, which it's close to doing. And the fact that most of the Arab world and other Muslim countries like Indonesia, Malaysia, Turkey, and European countries have all endorsed this plan is giving Israel permission to finish off Hamas militarily. And it's telling Hamas, you no longer have our diplomatic backs. And that includes Qatar telling Hamas that. So if Hamas reject this, then, I think they will crumble quickly. I think the only reason this war has gone on so long is not because Hamas are so strong militarily, but because they've been given diplomatic and other hope by protesters in the West, by Qatar, by certain European leaders like President Macron. If they stop giving Hamas hope, then I think they will surrender. And I don't mean surrender being a bad thing for the Palestinians. It is a good thing for the people of Gaza if Hamas surrender, because then we can start building peace between Israelis and Palestinians.
Tom Gross, thank you very much for your insights and analysis. We greatly appreciate your time and perspective on this important issue. Thanks a lot.
Happy to be with you. Thank you.